Welcome to another episode of Legal for Tech, the podcast. So it's always Rosie here. It's the end of the Christmas holidays, and we're back to tell you everything about a very, very interesting topic that we are very touched by because we're all on social media. And today we're going to talk about the Digital Service Act. So today I'm joined by my friend because this is a big explainer, and it's Giacomo Di Gregorio here. Hi, Giacomo.
Hi, Rosie. Thanks for inviting me for this interesting topic.
Thank you for joining me. Otherwise, I'd be talking to myself as always. Um, so, let's talk a bit about the Digital Service Act. What's important about it is that basically it replaces another of the European Union legislations. So I don't know if everyone knows about this, but basically I wasn't even born when this European directive, known as the e-commerce directive, was passed by the European Union, and it was already considered a pivotal change to the idea that the internet shall be free. So even in 2000s, the European Union was, well, breaking the um what people were used to when they were believing to think about the internet. And now we have the Digital Service Act, and this is an even greater step. So, Giacomo, I would want you to help me understand why it's a bigger step. What's changed? What's the biggest change in your opinion?
For me, the scope and the categories are like a big change from the e-commerce directive. Even if we are like 24 years later compared to the first directive,
God, I
it's
feel
a
old.
yeah, totally. It's a big change because with the e-commerce directive we had these intermediaries that were associated to it, and while with the DSA we still have the intermediaries, but from there we have new platforms that are processing our data that are under the obligation of the DSA, and so they're not only maintaining our data, they're also processing them. So that means that they are under our obligations. That that is for me like the biggest change. But I feel like there's more, right, Rosie?
Yes, so in case you haven't noticed, yes, of course, we've prepared this episode because, of course, I know that the obligations that Giacomo was talking about is that basically, compared to the e-commerce directive, um, online platforms actually have a duty. So we're talking about a legal obligation to monitor and inform authorities about the amount and the type of illegal content that can be circulated on the platforms. And most importantly, it is a take down obligation. So it's a kind of a posteriori obligation to take down any illegal content that is um, flagged by the authorities or by the users. And we'll see how this works because this was confusing to me. But that is a big difference between leaving the content there and perhaps taking it down when asked to actually actively making steps to make sure that there is no more illegal content on the platform once the investigation takes place. And also it changes this idea that the platform shall act when notified, kind of shifts the importance from illegal content simply being um, flagged by authorities. So a kind of like state to platform kind of vertical relationship to a very horizontal one because the platform has to be in touch with its users and the platform is actively taking care of its users in a kind of um, commercial but also very social kind of a community idea that the platforms has to take care of its users as much as the state should. So I think it's really interesting how this act really shifts the balance between the vertical protection of the state to the horizontal protection of the community in a way.
So basically,
Um,
the platforms are building this sort of community, if I got it right. Like they're building this community with the users to flag uh, harmful content. So as a user, for example, if I'm using Instagram, I can flag some content and tell Instagram to remove it. Am I right?
um, yes, sort of. So when you flag some content on Instagram, you also have to provide an explanation. And the reason why you have to is that there is a different, very important kind of distinction on the act between what's illegal content that must be taken down by law and harmful content. So you have probably noticed that if you see some content that, for example, displays, um, I don't know, for example, people crying or people shouting at each other, you could be able to flag it on Instagram, but that's not illegal, of course. The reason why you can flag it on Instagram is that in the terms and conditions that Instagram provides, there are rules on what type of platform Instagram wants to be. In short, Instagram is a community within many states, but Instagram as a community has the right to define what rules the members of its community should abide to and decide to abide to. So, how I would explain it is like in schools, sometimes there are rules on uniforms, and these are not state rules. It's not like every school has to to have uniforms. My school had a very ugly uniform, a very strange skirt. But anyways, we had to wear it, and people that didn't wear it risked detention. So it's not a criminal conviction usually, but I will not go further into this, but it is a detention, so it is a form of punishment within the community. And the same works with Instagram rules in the terms and conditions. So members of community agree to those rules. However, illegal content, those are the rules of the state. So Instagram has to abide to the rules of the state. But because Instagram is the grantor of that community and has an incredible power compared to like a community in the street, because Instagram can literally, like by definition, by technology, take down that content very swiftly. Then the state says, okay, you have to help me maintaining public order. So you have to help me by virtue of your presence in the state to abide to the laws of the state within your community. So that's the difference. And that also brings us to the point that there is a difference between illegal content, harmful content, and that both have to do with the right to the freedom of speech. So, as you are probably aware of this because we are both European, the Council of Europe in the Convention of Human Rights in the Council, so within the European community, it's 47 states right now because Russia, oops, not really being part of it. Um, Again, I will not dwell further. Um, so there is this idea that freedom of speech is a right that has to be limited by not harming the rights of others. So it's always a balanced right. It has to be balanced against the harm to another's right. For example, reputation, freedom of religion. There are many journalistic rights. It's a long list. But at the same time, this same definition, this same right, is viewed in the United States as kind of an absolute right. So what they called First Amendment right. My American accent is appalling as much as my uniform was. So in this, we have to understand that the DSA implies some kind of definition, some kind of doctrine of a right that is not necessarily understood by American platforms. So it's very difficult for them to comply with these rules, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Because if we think about the platforms that are categorized as very big online platforms under the DSA, we can see that, and also very big search engines, we can see that a lot of them are American. Just three of them are not. For example, Zalando, that is
Oh, that's true.
German. Yeah, exactly. And TikTok with ByteDance, that is Chinese, together with the Alibaba. So that's a bit complicated to understand, because they are, for example, they are based in the United States. So there's a bit of difference in the way how they handle all of this, right?
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned about them being like established in the US because I do see the huge difference in like how we see what's fair, especially like when you think of political elections, for example. And like in the US, it's a bit more rowdy. And also, did you notice that the like Twitter is in the list of the platforms to which the DSA applies? But I'm not too sure whether, I don't know what you think. He is kind of my obsession these days, but whether Elon Musk is actually abiding to these rules because he is spreading a lot of misinformation. It's really difficult to understand whether that kind of content should be viewed as illegal or not. So,
Yeah,
whew,
yeah, totally. It's such a thing right now with X, the former Twitter. Like there are a lot of talks, also because I think like the commission opened a formal proceedings against X, the former Twitter, that still hasn't ended, but we're pretty sure that the platform is right now spreading some misinformation, and we see how politics enter in the room in these cases, because uh, like if it would be like Meta, another platform, like for sure the DSA would be applied immediately. But for X, they are waiting for Trump to be elected and to see how to move, for example, with the taxes and with the relation with Trump, together with X, that is which is the CEO is of course Elon Musk, that is kind of advisor to Trump. So the commission is waiting to see how to move on that side, if they want to give some penalties to X, or if they want to wait for that, because maybe it could be like a tool to wait for, to avoid like I don't know, like a brutal relationship with the Americans, I would say.
yes, that's a very, very interesting point actually you made because politics is like permeates everything we do, especially because I mean the European Union is a political body, and sometimes it looks like much more bureaucratic than political, but um, but it's not. Like it's still politics. So it's very well exciting what you said. Excellent point again, but okay, I'll stop this. And instead ask you another question before the listeners just decide to delete this podcast from the face of Earth. So my question is like, we've talked about how the commission works. We've talked about what kind of obligations there are. But how are we certain under the DSA that these companies, which are very big and very powerful, actually comply with these obligations? Like, what's our means of finding that out?
Yeah, under the DSA, it's mandatory for these big platforms, but not for the smaller ones, to give every at least once per year a risk assessment, where they show how comply to the rules, and how also they assess and they mitigate the risk associated to their platform. So, for example, in this risk assessment, they must include the number of orders that are received by national authorities on the illegal content to be taken down, and also they must include the number of notices under notification mechanism, distinguishing the content flagged by these flaggers from taken down under the authorities' request. And also, something that is really interesting is to show that they use uh, like they some sort of moderate their content through an automated in an automated way. But that's really interesting because they just show that. So they are not showing how they moderate the content. It's just showing that they do that. Isn't it like a bit odd?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it's also a bit creepy because you never know what they do there. But no, my point was like content moderation, as you correctly pointed out, is not compulsory. So there isn't an obligation to do content moderation. There is an obligation to take down illegal content. As for content moderation, is more like a very, very strong nudge, I would say, especially because it helps platforms to make sure that there is no illegal content so that then they get fined. So it's a really good way to operate around the obligation. It's kind of more like an implementative measure than just um, okay, I give you this obligation, and you go there, find your way out. But the point you made is, I mean, it's excellent again. Um, is that if the content moderation is done through algorithms, so it's automated, you can't really explain how it's made because there's always the problem of black boxing. So there are statistics that show like what kind of content was moderated through time, but it's kind of like an ex post kind of statistic. So you can see with time how it builds up and how probably the algorithm works into deciding what is to be moderated and what isn't. But you can't be sure. It's a probabilistic kind of decision. And also it's a decision that's always based like between two types of content. So it's a type of comparison, continuous comparison. So you never know what gets into the comparison and why the outcome of the comparison is specific content. Um, so it is very difficult to operate content moderation in the right way. And when it's automated, nobody can be actually accountable for it because it's a machine. So I think you made a very good point. Is like it's people talking, speaking. It's our personal experiences. Instagram is built around the idea of meaningful connections, and it's an algorithm that decides what gets on Instagram and what doesn't. And yeah, I do agree. It's a very good point you made, and they just have to state it, which is really annoying in my opinion. So maybe there is room for further improvements again. Um, but having that said, just because I'm conscious of the time, there is a very interesting obligations that I want to talk to you about, which is that within the transparency obligations, and I shall remind our listeners that you find all the information about what we're talking about on our website, Legal for Tech, or on our LinkedIn page, and we have published a article on this that you will find in the link to the show notes. But there is this advertisement obligation of transparency so that like online platforms and very big online platforms have to specify whether they are publishing content that contains a commercial benefit for the party publishing it. Um, so what do you like? Do you think this has been effective in your opinion?
I feel like the laws on this could be slightly different, even in the European member states. Like if you, as we were discussing before, like about influencers and so on, like influencers are in Italy, for example, the country where we come from, they have a law. They have some moderation on the advertising, for example.
It was all thanks to
But
the panettone of Chiara Ferragni, in case there are
yeah,
Italian
that
listeners.
that maybe also the international ones would know. But yeah, they are moderated in some way, but it's not like that in every member state. So how do you deal with the advertising of influencers, but also journals and so on? So that, for from my point of view, is a loophole in this law that was adopted by the European Union.
Yes, I agree. With influencers is a big point that will be hopefully made by our colleagues at Legal for Tech, because I'm told that there's a small piece coming up. So guys, keep tuned. So yes, I agree with you. The influencers is a big problem, and it's starting to be solved, I think. But it's got a lot of backlash beforehand, and that's quite sad. Despite me loving watching makeup videos, of course, I would still like. No, actually, I prefer the ones where they cook. Despite me being terrible at cooking, at least I see someone being much better than I am, and rejoicing in their happiness from cooking.
That's because
But
you will think that your result will be the same as the one that you watch, but it's never like that.
yeah, normally my fried egg is actually it's quite pretty. I mean, if you look at it from a distance, a very long distance, it's actually not a better. Okay, I'll stop this. And go fry the egg later, of course. But I also wanted to say something about, so yeah, we talked about the role of influencers, but let's remember always that online platforms are communities made of people like influencers, like me, sadly, for you, but also that these people have rights. And the fact that their presence on platforms is regulated by tech doesn't allow anyone else to infringe upon their rights. And on that, that is a beautiful segue to say that platforms also will have, like under the DSA, have an obligation to ensure that any content that's taken down is explained, like the takedown is explained to the person who published it. And that also they have to ensure an audit mechanism. And I think that this is really important because I remember when I my sociology exam, it was very much about like how communities in the past, like in the Paleolithic era, worked in this kind of like non-legal but still very kind of um, embracing way of ensuring that everyone had a voice in the group. And it's actually been like, if you think of something like in the Iliad, it really begins with a meeting of the princes, of the generals that are fighting the war in Troy, and how, and they talk it out, like they try to understand who the slave belongs to. So is it Agamemnon? Is it Achilles? And there's this kind of accountability, mutual accountabilities in communities. And I think it's very important because the DSA recognizes that um, online platforms are communities, and the creators of the community um, have a much bigger kind of impact upon how the rights are respected amongst the individuals within the community. And you don't necessarily need the state enforcement authority for ensuring that the rights are respected. So there is, as I said, there's a shift between the verticality that has been seen before to this kind of horizontal taking care of each other, which is really beautiful, and it's typical of the European Union, in my opinion. And that really connects with what you were saying about the Digital Fairness Act, because there's this idea of fairness that has to be respected by privates and public authorities at the same time. So I think it's really beautiful. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so yeah.
totally. You mentioned this Digital Fairness Act. that's exactly because the European Union always want to preserve the rights of its consumers, and that's like the discussion in Brussels about the Digital Fairness Act is going around because they notice that there are still some, as we also said during this episode podcast, that there are also still some loopholes on preserving like users' rights in the digital world, and that's why the European Commission is trying to cover these holes that have been produced by this not produced, I would say more not covered by this legislation, and that's an interesting discussion because this is starting to become more and more on fire because now that we are in the new year, of course, some action will be taken, but we need to see like which action, if it will be like a big action or a small action, because we have people that are pushing on one side and people that are pushing on the other side. Of course, politics is always a compromise, but in this case, it's interesting to see that because the discussion on the competitiveness also is entailing this. So the companies are trying to lobby the commission not to put some new laws to regulate them on the digital market, because already there are a lot of regulations and they feel like a lot of burden and they are asking for a simplification. So is the commission really going to adopt a big measure on this? So I wanted just to share this because it's gonna be like a very interesting and insightful discussion in Brussels in the next months.
I'm very much looking forward to it. And you did mention that there are a lot of regulations, and we have been covering actually on this podcast. Just scroll down and look at the episodes. We have been covering another big regulation that's just been implemented. That's the DMA, so the Digital Markets Act. And you are an expert of my decision. Uh, can you can you explain to our listeners why this regulation, the DSA, is different from the DMA? Because I feel like, first of all, it's really difficult to distinguish DSA, DMA, but also that it just looks like it's one regulation upon the other. Why did we need a DMA?
The first important difference is the letter in the middle, so the S in place of the M.
There's always somebody in the middle.
Jokes apart, I feel like one of the most important differences between, they are part of the same package, so they're trying to regulate the digital market in Europe, but of course they have a different objective. As we said with the previous episode, like the digital market is more about preventing anti-competitive preventing anti-competitive actions by these platforms, and trying to place a field that is fair to all the people, all the organizations that are working in this in Europe. While for the DSA, the main objective, as you said before, is preserve the user rights. Combating, as we said, the systemic risk, and also ensuring the transparency and accountability. But also one of the main differences, for sure, the fact that in the Digital Market Act we have just the gatekeepers that have these obligations, the obligations that are written in the DMA, while in the DSA the basic obligations are for all the platforms, while for the very large online platforms and the very big search engines, we have like stricter rules. So this is like another important difference. So all the organizations that are working in the field, according to the DSA, should respect the basic rules that are inside the DSA.
Yeah, I think that that's also quite fair because, I mean, the bigger you are, the greater number of effects you have on several things. It's just like if one platform starts covering a huge amount of services, and I shall quote lovely Mark Zuckerberg when he said, "Senator, we have ads." Of course, if you have ads, you also have a big, big portion of the market for ads. So, um, the more services one company covers, there's Amazon, there's Facebook Marketplace, Google Marketplace as well, the more kind of rules they have to respect because they have different impacts. So, just to answer to my own question, as I tend to do, and I think our listeners have figured that out, um, let's say that the two regulations were needed because one covers one issue, which is transparency, accountability, as you said, and ensuring that the user experience is not manipulated on online platforms and it doesn't become dangerous to the benefit of the community. To the other DMA kind of objective, which is to ensure that the user experience is fair from a market perspective, so that one is based on community and the other one is based on the market. So of course we needed two different things, and it's really, really, really important. So I will stop talking, and I promise, and make one last point, which is a very, very quick point to make, which is, can everybody flag the content, or is there like a hierarchy? Because I feel like this is going to be really dangerous. If I don't like you, I'm just going to flag you. And there's a lot of people I want to flag. So please enlighten me on this.
Yeah, exactly. That's there is for sure like something covering that because, as you said, like also, for example, if I'm an organization and I'm paid from by Facebook, I could flag a competitor just because it's a competitor. So
Flag Elon, flag Elon. Okay,
no,
also,
we are not.
we like the guy now that Trump is in power.
We are not paid by Thierry Betron.
We are
But
not paid, full stop. That's the
yeah,
issue.
yeah, that's true.
If anyone wishes to volunteer, we're more than open for offers. Uh,
But yeah, as I was saying, like the European Commission has established a whistleblower tool where like there are these so-called trusted flaggers. Uh, they are organizational people that are recognized by the Commission in spotting the unlawful content online. And for example, we could have NGOs or public entities, industry association, independent experts. But the important thing is that it's not if I'm an independent expert, I can just flag the content. I have a process that is established by the Commission to become a trusted flaggers. That is a bureaucratic process. So to ensure that I'm transparent and I like and to ensure like there is no conflict of interest on this side. So let's say if I don't like something, I cannot just say okay, just take it down, please, von der Leyen, take it down, and we're done with that platform.
I am still very much sure that if I send a very, very nice email to von der Leyen on specific contents, perhaps she may consider, but maybe we can invite her on this podcast. No, no, okay. I'm I'm not
In the
dreaming that
future,
much.
in the future.
In the very big future. But yeah, in case she wants to perhaps start working on some content takedown, we're more than happy to provide a list of all our competitors, of course. Um, amongst which, by the way, I will then shut up. I found out that there are people that are recording these episodes using AI. Basically, they put in some content and then they ask the AI notebook, I think Microsoft Notebook, I think, to produce a podcast. And I'm like, no, you will have to hear my voice forever and ever, and my beautiful jokes forever and ever. So, von der Leyen, please take down that content because it's very sad. I find it very sad. Anyways, our listeners know that this is not AI made because otherwise it would be much better in terms of quality. But it was a pleasure to talk to you. Um,
It was a
thank you for
pleasure
being
from my
here.
side. It's always good to discuss these topics with you. Also because from me, and I hope also from for our listeners, some of them that are not really expert in the legal field, could be it's super insightful to listen how you explain the things, and also like the similarities that you make. Like the uniform one is perfect. I feel like it was direct to the point, so it was really easy to understand what you wanted to explain. So thank you, Rosie.
Thank you, and do not reveal that I gave you a very, very, very big Christmas present for saying this. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you very, very soon. We hope you enjoyed the Christmas break, and well, stay tuned for all the news that are coming up to Legal for Tech, the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.